Hi, everyone. Okay, you can hear me. Morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Rachel Adams. I am the new associate curator at the UB Art Galleries in Buffalo, New York. Very happy to be here today and to have this wonderful panelists. I'm just going to go down the line, introduce them. I'm going to show some slides about sort of how this panel came together, and then they're each going to present, and then I hope you all write down some questions you want to ask. The first person, Nora Lawrence, she is the curator at Storm King, and I hope some of you have been there before. If you haven't, she's opening new shows this weekend, so thank you for coming here today. Andre Bober is the director of Landmarks, which is at the University of Texas at Austin. It's the public art collection at Austin. Gordon Montgomery is at the Art Institute. He is in the public relations department and worked with Art is Everywhere, which is what he's going to be talking about today. And Aaron Ott is the new, or somewhat new, public art curator at the Albright Knox in Buffalo. Okay. So lately, you've all read this description, but I'll just kind of summarize it for you. Lately, more and more museums are reimagining what it means to be a public museum, thinking strategically sort of outside of the walls, outside of the sculpture park. And Tom talked about this yesterday too, sort of the audience engagement and how we engage with our community. And so in this panel, we're going to look at some institutions and organizations that are meeting this challenge. So I'm just going to go through a few slides of some sculpture parks and collections that I've been thinking about and organizations. I am a recent transplant to Buffalo, and I worked at the Contemporary Austin, which is Contemporary Art Museum in Austin, hence the name. But it has two locations. One is actually kind of a Kunsthalle-style building downtown, and another is a 13-acre sculpture park. And this is sort of a new merger that happened in 2011. And so as a curator there, we were tasked with figuring out how to engage both sites and get people to go to both sites. We had audiences that were very much set in going to one or the other. So over the course of the years, I've been doing research about public art, which was sort of the new direction that Louis Grachos, the new director in Austin, wanted to go. And now being at a university museum myself, who doesn't have a public art collection, it's been really helpful because I'm thinking about this as well. So the deCordova Museum, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the deCordova, has really become, for me, a premier sculpture park. I used to go there in high school. I love it. I visited quite frequently. Nora and I were actually on the advisory board for the last biennial, and they have a wonderful collection that some permanent works, some temporary works that rotate, and that's something that I really think is interesting with sculpture parks nowadays, not having such a static presence. So this is obviously Ursula von Riesengaard, the Dan Graham, which I just saw in the snow, which was really amazing in the snow, I will say that. And this DeWitt Godfrey, who is a really wonderful artist, actually lives in Western New York, and this is a site-specific piece that he did there. Another sculpture park that I have been looking at a lot is 100 Acres at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, Lisa Fryman's project that she did while she was there. And this was actually 10 commissions, all temporary when she proposed them, and some of them have been acquired by the museum now. But when they originally were proposed, they were all temporary long-term loans from the artists. So this is Atelier van Lieshout, Funky Bones, which has become a place of gathering. A lot of people go there and picnic and spend time. 100 Acres is actually 96 acres. That's just a little quip that I know about it. And this is Los Carpenteros-Free Basket, which is, I think, one of the most amazing public art pieces. And actually, the community started busing in kids to play this basketball court. So it's been really active. The museum actually acquired it a couple of years ago, I believe. So it is a permanent piece now. Now Lisa's gone, I don't know exactly the direction that they're going, but I know that this has become a huge part of the Indianapolis community. There's actually a lake as well. So there's this Kendall Buster piece, which is temporary, and it's a pier. But Andrea Sattel has done a residency and called Indie Island, so people can go and kind of spend time actually in the lake, artists, and they do a lot of classes and things like that. Moving on to university campuses, I hope everybody is familiar with the Stewart Collection at UC San Diego. This is Mary Beebe's project that she's been doing for quite some time. And I just went to UC San Diego in November and walked the campus, and I was just astounded by the quality and the amazing installation of all of these artworks. This is Doho So's, it's literally jammed onto the side of the building. You can kind of see it from below. You can go up into the building. You can get into the house. It's really fantastic. I couldn't get into the house that day. It was closed. I was a little sad. But this is Tim Hawkinson's Bear, which again has become this sort of centerpiece on the campus. A lot of students congregate around it. They have a lot of clubs and things that meet, like Meet at the Bear, sort of that iconic piece. And then Alexis Smith's Snake Path, which actually goes up to the library. And while I was there, a group of bikers came through and biked up the path, and it was pretty fantastic to watch them really struggling, because it actually is a little bit steeper than you think. And then the MIT Public Art Collection, which is a really venerated collection. This Louise Nevelson, which is an amazing piece. Solowitz bars of color within squares. Again, activating the campus. So moving outside the gates, I look at Creative Time a lot. I'm excited about their show that's opening on Friday. I hope people are thinking about going to Central Park for the next month. But really thinking about how they have really activated New York City and beyond with their projects, all different types of projects, a lot of audience interaction. This is Karen Finley's project, 1-900 All Karen, that you could call for 6 months, and every day she recorded a new message, so you could kind of hear something new. Musings on politics, life, motherhood, everything. This project, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, the Tribute in Light, which went up a year after 9/11, and actually I think they put it up every year until recently when the tower was now rebuilt. Paul Ramirez Jonas's Key to the City, which was a big one in the summer in 2010, where people could get a passport and a key and kind of go around the city and find new things, go to touristy places, go to places that they never thought they would go to. Really moving people through space in different ways. Nick Cave's Heard. I don't know if anyone has seen some of these performances, but I know that in Grand Central Station when they did this, I think they ended up doing it a couple of times because it was so well attended, obviously. And then Kara Walker's Marvelous Sugar Baby. And this is a new piece that Spencer Finch will be doing as part of Drifting in Daylight Art in Central Park, which is a collaboration with the Central Park Conservancy. It's their 30th anniversary this year. So they have, Creative Time has commissioned, I think, 10 artists to do pieces in the park, and that opens on Friday. And I think I'm actually going to stop there because I'm more excited about what you guys are doing, but that was sort of just to give you guys some background about what I was thinking about when I put this panel together, which actually kind of came about into my head last year during our conference. So I'm very excited that it ended up working out. So I'm just gonna flip through these really quickly and get to Nora's presentation. So.
Hope that stays there. Okay. This is not going to. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me, and so nice to meet everyone else on the panel. Let's see. Okay. So I am at Storm King Art Center, and this is just a little map to remind you of how close it is to New York City. It went without me meaning to press, but here we are about 60 miles north of the city. And a number of you may have seen this classic view that has often been the way people have looked at Storm King. This is a view of our south fields. I'm sorry, I'm just going to try to get this right for a second. Our south field showing a number of our Marc DeSuvero works. That's a good idea, yes. There was just a request, and I agree, to turn down the lights slightly so that maybe we could see the slides a little bit better. Is that possible? Okay, I'll keep talking in the meantime. So we're a 500-acre site. We were founded in 1960, and I wanted to sort of talk a little bit with the inspiration of Rachel's topic about the ways in which we're engaging not only with artwork specifically, but also our landscape and integrating these different things. And I think I'll go through a number of different things we've been doing in the past about 5 years, some longer, but just to show you sort of the range of things that we're doing with our site. We're definitely somewhat unique in the United States, and particularly on the East Coast, to have this much space. And so we've been trying to sort of pay tribute to it in a lot of the works that we've done. This is Andy Goldsworthy's Storm King Wall, which was done in the late 1990s. And I wanted to sort of also pay tribute to our history and say, you know, it has been about really using the site, really making land artworks for a long time. This is Richard Serra's Scunnamunk Fork going in our south fields. And what's interesting, some of these slides are sort of a little bit rogue. Sorry, they're turning without me turning them, at least so I think. But these works, so we have this Andy Goldsworthy work, Richard Serra work, and here it is, Scunnamunk Fork, which refers to this mountain, Scunnamunk Mountain behind it, and these 4 pieces, excuse me. And then this is Maya Lin's wave field going in, which was made with dirt and gravel from the site. So again, I'm not pressing this. I don't know what's happening. But just to say, just to say, all of these pieces, what I think was pretty extraordinary about them that I learned when I came on, is that Storm King had been initially sort of at the north end of our site, and these pieces have all pushed our landscape further south. Every time they've been put in, they've been sort of further and further south on this 500-acre plot of property. When Richard Serra put in Scunnamunk Fork, it was in the middle of a farm field. We owned it, but there was no idea that that was a site for artwork. So we've been sort of pushing the boundaries physically as different works have gone in. And then Maya Lin's was absolutely the furthest south at the time when it went in 2007. And then another thing about Maya Lin that I thought would get us into another part of Storm King's history is it's actually planted, with native grasses. We work with a landscape architect who is a professor at Columbia, Daryl Morrison, who's helped us reintegrate native grasses into our site and sort of bring back what should be there, not just regular turf or regular grass, but really what should be in the Hudson Valley. So Maya was very keen on bringing some of those grasses back in, and you can sort of see this fuzz here. And we've also been integrating a wildflower program to reintegrate the wildflowers that should be at our site back into our native landscape. And here's some of these beautiful tall grasses with, you can just see a bit of Andy Goldsworthy's wall in the background. And then, not to be too extreme, but what we do with them every year is we burn them. We burn them off, which is a way of sort of naturally regenerating them. And one thing and this is what it looks like afterwards. These fields have been recently burned, and then these will grow up completely again over the course of a season and be, 3, 4, 5 feet tall. But what we've learned is, and I think this is sort of back to the point of this talk, people love seeing things like this. So whenever possible, we try to invite our members to come and see this burning, which really just happens once a year. It's hard to predict because you have to have exactly the right wind conditions. It has to be a day that's not rainy. It has to be between either before March 15th or after May 15th. So there are all these sort of parameters around it. But when we can, we try to sort of invite people in and let them know a little bit more about what we're doing and why. And then just thinking again about our environment and the different types of works that our environment has inspired. This is a work by Peter Coffin called Untitled Bees Making Honey. And this, again, is even further down in the south of our landscape than Maya Lin's piece. So technically, it's more of a performance art piece, but it's the piece that's furthest south for us. And this is an image of Peter actually working with our beekeeper, Colin Coyne, and we do tours of this beehive every Saturday. It started with a show that I did in 2012 called Light and Landscape, when Peter wanted to sort of make these connections between beehives and how they use the sun and call attention to colony collapse disorder, other things going on with bees these days. But we realized that Storm King was a great place to really foster beehives, and that to do it with an artist and to work in this way with our landscape was something we were interested in keeping. So it's still here after 3 or 4 years. And then another thing that has inspired sort of a long-term public event for us was Spencer Finch, and second Spencer Finch mention today, but Spencer Finch's Lunar, which also came to us during this light and landscape exhibition, has these solar panels on the side. It's meant to look like a sort of a lunar landing module, and it glows in the dark. And I put in a few images of it because I think it's pretty amazing. But it inspired us to have these moonlit walks. So we started them with Spencer Finch's project, but we've continued them every year. And actually this year, with our Linda Banglash show, she's created a new work that glows in the dark that's going to be out in our South Fields, the biggest sculpture she's ever created. So we're going to have walks out to that as well at night. So this has been something that's stuck. This is an image of people walking out to Marc de Souvreau's piece. This is an image, and again, the lights are sort of high for moonlit photos, but this is an image of people looking at this beautiful full moon. And then from that, we moved into having these supermoon screenings. We've had one of these so far. In August, there was this supermoon. I mean, the brightest moon that I think probably happened all year, but this full moon, lucky for us, landed on a Saturday night. So we worked with Rooftop Films to bring this film ramble with five different screens, musicians performing between the different performances of the short films that we were showing, and Rooftop helped us sort of program what a nice program of short films would be for viewing outdoors at Storm King on an August evening. And then I just sort of thought that this theme of thinking of ways to bring people to Storm King at unlikely moments was interesting in the context of this panel. We have winter walks. These are two people under snowfall, I believe, at Jangwon's Three-Legged Buddha, and we lead those for members 3 times a year, January, February, March. And then yoga, we do yoga right by, on Museum Hill or really wherever the yoga instructor feels like bringing people. So that's something that can happen early Saturday mornings. Concerts, this is Waxahachie playing. And this is Widow Speak performing in front of Mozart's quartet by Marc de Souvreau, excuse me. Beethoven's quartet, sorry. And then we've started a program called Outlooks, which is meant to bring in emerging artists who might be interested in working on a large scale but might not have had the ability to do so or the means to do so in the past. We're very aware that we talk a lot about, well, what happens even with 500 acres? Could we fill up? We don't want to fill up. So I think we're also looking towards more temporary installations as a way to sort of continuously activate our site without sort of that fear of these large-scale, permanent works sort of overtaking everything. So we're doing both. We do commission permanent works, but on sort of a very steady, slow stream. And then we're working with contemporary artists to do temporary works that are on view for generally from May through November, so for most of our season. This is David Brooks standing by his proverbial machine in the garden. And this is David. I should have shown this first to show what this piece is. We bought a used tractor and buried it in our landscape. David wanted to talk about the history of farming on our site as well as the history of earth moving, that Storm King is not a natural site completely. We've always worked with landscape architects, and it's interesting. This is also something that we have sort of shied away from talking about in the past, but something that we're very open with now. So David wanted to sort of pay tribute to both of these things with this piece, and this is just one of my favorite photos in the world of David at this sort of tractor graveyard that we went to together. It was an amazing, memorable day. I was 8 months pregnant. They were extremely confused to see these two people from, he's from Brooklyn. I was at that point from Manhattan, and they were like, why are you buying a dead tractor? So they kept wonderfully trying to steer David. They were very good people. They kept trying to steer him towards tractors that were the best deal. And he'd sort of stand on top and look down at it and say, that just doesn't look very tractor-y to me. It's not very tractor-y. So, because this is what we were doing with it, we just needed it, we didn't need it to be light. We didn't need it to, this one didn't have brakes. And we also really loved that the model, it was a late 60s Dynaho tractor, which we also loved because thinking about digging and fossils, and then this is called Dynaho, and we're burying it underground. That seemed perfect. So here are few different views of it. And another thing about David's piece that was different for us, and that you're going to see one more time here, is this idea of works at Storm King not having any view at all. I mean, this is something that's completely underground and sort of thinking of our site in a totally different way, and that's just something that we're really opening up to. Another thing he included in his piece was this takeaway about the fact that Storm King is really what it is, and we've had the opportunity to gain the 500 acres that we have because we're right next to the I-87 thruway, and that was actually a plot of land that had been decimated. They'd taken a lot of gravel from our site to build the thruway, and so it was kind of unused farmland, and we were able to sort of get these parcels together and eventually make this beautiful 500-acre site from land that had not been desirable at all. Virginia Overton was the next Outlooks artist last year, and she made a work with this brass tube that went, this is just her with a model of it. We're sort of looking at it in the tall grasses because that's where she wanted it to be. This is putting it in with our earth mover. Sorry. And this is it. It was just this really subtle piece that went across about 500 feet of this, again, farm field that we're actually using to actively bale hay from. And so this piece looked very different in May to July to November. We baled the hay twice. So I think I have an image of, so here it is, this tractor actually getting involved with Virginia's piece, which she loved having happen. And it would really change the way that the piece looked, but also she wanted to be in this field and she wanted to be in this site where something was actively happening. She grew up on a farm in Tennessee and felt this real connection with these types of activities that we were doing. Here again, I just sort of love this picture of Mark DeSubro's Pyramidion with this tractor in the front baling hay. And then just to say a few words about this year's exhibitions, we're doing a project with Luke Stetner. This is our current Outlooks artist. And he too was looking at Storm King's landscape and made another piece that has relatively no profile. He wanted to make something very flat in the ground. Here's Luke installing a few weeks ago. And this is still in progress. It's something that is going to be complete for our opening this Saturday, actually, May 16th. And what we're doing is we're filling these trenches with biochar, which is a type of charcoal made locally from trees that have fallen naturally. And so we're filling it up with this biochar that's actually a soil enhancement. And we're going to then be either donating or selling, depending on our situation, the biochar after the exhibition to a local farm. So this is a piece that he again sort of was thinking about, excuse me, back and forth is hard for me. He was thinking about archaeological excavation sites as well as models that you might see of ancient houses where these circles represent columns and the straight lines represent old walls. And this piece is called A.B. Moon D, which is actually him thinking about a toddler's confusion of the letter C with a crescent moon. So there was this toddler who is my child, okay, fine, who was actually saying A.B. Moon D at the time when Luke was putting this piece together, and he just thought that was this amazing sort of conflation of different language systems. And so his piece is sort of about this idea of, is this something new that he made? Is it based on something old? Or is it completely different than anything that's existed in the past? And he also has an exhibition that he's putting up in one of our gallery spaces of his photographs to sort of go along with this idea. And then we're also opening this Linda Benglis exhibition. So these are, if the slide could show you, these are gorgeous, super, super bright pink sculptures. These are fountains on our hill, and these are taller fountains behind. So all of these works are brand new works by Linda that I hope you come see this year. And The one other thing that we're doing for the first time this year that I think is a great new use of our space is we're hosting the Shandaken Project residency program for 2 years. We have 7 houses on site at Storm King that have been largely underused. So we thought it would be a great way to think about a permanent residency program, but piloting a program with an existing residency. Nick Wiest is the director at the Shandaken Project, and trying to figure out the best way to sort of invite a new generation of artists into our site and to be able to have them find it an inspiring place in different ways than we've been accustomed to in the past. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Landmarks is the public art program of UT Austin, and it's a relatively young program, so when Amy invited me to talk today, she asked me to give a little bit of its history and a quick overview of the collections. So I thought we'd begin with Austin, Texas. Austin is known for its creative, laid-back culture. Its major export is lifestyle and kind of offbeat culture. Sports, and it's known as the live music capital of the world. It also has exotic natural beauty. And if you've been to Austin, you might appreciate that I sometimes like to call it a retirement community for young people. Austin's the state capital and home to UT's flagship university that has about 50,000 students and 20,000 faculty and staff. It occupies a 433-acre main campus in addition to 500 acres up north, and there's about 200 buildings on this campus. Now, the art on the campus was pretty modest prior to the start of Landmarks in 2008. In addition to this lovely fountain from 1932, there is a series of Civil War statues. There are memorials to, yes? There are memorials to modern heroes in civil rights and social justice. There's livestock, a lot of livestock. And there are honorific statues celebrating sports. On the left, you've got a celebrated football coach. On the right, there's a football philanthropist. There are football players and football fans. I'd like to point out that works like this can actually help illustrate the history of Western sculpture. But admittedly, these are pretty humble beginnings. In 2005, UT realized that the public art being offered on campus was behind the curve. But that there were also opportunities to be had. And that's when I was invited to start Landmarks. And like you, I came from a curatorial background in museums. So whatever Landmarks was going to become, I felt pretty certain about a few principles. One is that I thought it was important to define a really clear curatorial scope from the outset. And I wanted to make sure that whatever this collection would be, that the works themselves and the programs that surrounded Landmarks would really support the pedagogical mission of the university. So to get started, what we did was we formed an extraordinary partnership with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in which they generously loaned us on long-term loan 28 modern and contemporary sculptures from their permanent collection. This was an auspicious beginning because it helped us establish a cohesive foundation so that we could start building our own collection on top of these works that the Met had loaned us. They represent the second half of the 20th century, and they also gave rise to a program which has really become core to Landmarks. And quite frankly, I haven't seen anything else like this in the world, but I think it's a very useful program. We have a series of about 30 volunteers a year. They're student volunteers who come, and they formed the Landmarks Preservation Guild. We give them training in conservation techniques, so they learn basic skills like waxing and washing and doing condition reports. And they're our eyes and ears. They report back to us and to the Met, and we give them the experience, and then they also help us keep the sculptures looking really terrific. I think this is a great model, and so anyone who might be thinking about a public art program, I think it's something to consider adopting. So now we'll move to a quick overview of some of the works that we have acquired since the Metropolitan loan. Met really built a foundation, an art historical foundation for our collecting activities, and these are a few of the pieces that we've acquired since then. Mark DeSuvro's sculpture Clock Knot, which sits on the northern edge of our campus. Down here, I don't know if you can even see it, that is a concrete block structure by Saul LeWitt. There's a bigger picture of it. This we were able to acquire from the Madison Square Park, and it's in front of the Dell Computer Science building. On the inside of that building is a wall drawing by Saul LeWitt as well. It occupies 3 walls. And it's nice, I think, to have the balance of the drawing inside and the structure outside. Then in between those 2 works is a work by a more emerging artist. His name is Casey Reese. Casey was deeply influenced by Saul LeWitt's work. He also creates instruction-based works. His work, however, instead of being implemented by hands, is implemented by computers. He writes algorithms or codes that generates these different forms. So this is 2 walls, and when you get close up, you have these kind of wonderful micro compositions. He created this using processing, which is this open source code that many artists and animators use who work with computers. Another artist who works with computers is the data artist, Ben Rubin. If you could play the slide, please, that'd be great. You might know Ben's work from the headquarters of the New York Times building. Is it going? Okay. This is just a little composite of fragments from the piece that he created for us. It's called And That's the Way It Is. It's a 6-channel projection, and it occupies the facade of this O'Neill Ford building that houses the Communication College. What he did for this piece was he pulled data from 2 different sources. One was from Walter Cronkite's archives. Cronkite was an alum of UT, and the archives are there at the university. And the other was from 5 live news feeds, 5 different channels. So every moment that it's playing, the words and the phrases change, and they are phrases that are chosen from that very moment in the news. So it has a real immediacy and a real sense of presence to it. Another piece that we opened recently was by James Turrell. It's called The Color Inside. It sits on top of a rooftop of the Student Activity Center, so it's right in the heart of campus. It's an elliptically shaped oculus and space. It's his 84th work that he's created around the world. And ours has a black basalt interior. It seats about 25 people. During the sunrise and during sunset, there are these light sequences that wash the space with different colors, and so it causes you to perceive the sky in very different hues. And I'll also just add that in the last few weeks, I found out that in the last 12-month period, we had 80,000 people visit this piece alone, and that's kind of amazing considering only 25 can be in there at a time. Our most recent piece we just completed is by Nancy Rubens. This is a piece from her monochrome series. It kind of cantilevers out into the street, and it's made of 70 canoes and skiffs and boats. And it's quite beautiful, I think. I think it's very photogenic, which is why I have a number of details as well. But the thing that really surprised me was that I recalled about 5 years before we started this project being approached about working with her on one of these. And at the time, my response was categorical. There's no way we could bring Nancy Rubens to our campus. We're just not ready for it. Because people were, I think it would have been difficult for them to make sense of this kind of sculpture. But 5 years later, after the Metropolitan, after a number of the other works that we brought and their success and the credibility of the program, this has been really accepted on campus. And It's made a lot of people very excited and happy. So just some more details. Another program that we brought to campus is called Landmarks Video. And what Landmarks Video does is it presents the work of a video artist every month. And we've been doing this program now for about 5 years. The idea being that we're bringing works to campus so that really the students or anyone who's on campus can see them and not just have to learn about them in textbooks. To kick off the program, we commissioned Dave Ellis. If you can click this next slide to play, please, that'd be great. This is another excerpt from his piece called Animal, in which he did a 6-week residency at the university, and he did one of his motion paintings, whereby he paints a canvas on the ground over and over and over again. The motion is captured with still shots from a camera up above, and then after the 6-week period, he compressed all of those together into a 9-minute video, which is pretty captivating because you see the sped up over time. He also worked with artist Roberto Lange, who composed a score, which is not playing now, but it's made up of sounds that he gathered while he was in Austin during that period. And I'll quickly go through our upcoming projects. Today, Michael Ray Charles is installing this piece, which is actually just one module of a larger installation, which is going to be in this new building that it centers for different cultural diversity groups, departments. So the department that he had been very involved with was the Center for African and African American Diaspora. And so this piece will be there. We're working with artist Ann Hamilton, who is going to do a photographic series for us, much like this one, which I believe was from Minneapolis. For ours, it'll be for the New Dell Medical School, and she'll be working with patients and caregivers, and the theme will be objects that provide comfort. We're also working with artist Jose Parla for a large mural in a graduate school of business. This is his piece from the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and this one recently opened at World Trade Center 1, I believe. And this is the last piece I'll show. This is a recent acquisition. It's Mark Quinn's Spiral of the Galaxy from 2013, and this will also be at the entrance to our new Dell Medical School. So that's just a quick overview, and I hope that it helps introduce you to the work that we're doing at Landmarks. And again, I just want to thank you, Amy, for inviting me. Thanks.
Got it. All right, now that I have my AV figured out. Again, my name is Gordon Montgomery. I'm from the Art Institute of Chicago. Let me see if I can straighten this. And I'm going to talk to you about a program, let's see if we can get it, called Art Everywhere. How many people in the room are aware of Art Everywhere? Maybe about half or so. So what I'm going to talk about is what the program was, interestingly, how we actually made it happen, and then what were some of the results that came as this program unfolded last year. So Art Everywhere was a public celebration of art. For the month of August of last year, 2014, we were able to feature some of the most iconic pieces of American art on 60,000 billboards and transit panels and other outdoor applications across the United States. It literally appeared in all 50 states and in both major cities and small towns across America. And these are just some of the installations that you can see, again, whether they're on trucks or bus panels or highway billboards or even in Times Square, like up in the upper left. This is just a little backgrounder. The idea originally came from the UK in 2013. They had done this over in London in particular. And it was a great success over there. And we then got a call a year later and said, hey, could we do the same thing here in the US? And that's a little bit how it started. But if we could you play this slide here? This just gives a little background. This is a CBS News clip. No? All right, so we can't play the slide. Sorry about that. But basically what this was, this started out a British entrepreneur. His name's Richard Reed, sort of like a Richard Branson, who had started a very popular organic juice company over in the UK, was inspired one day when he saw a piece of art displayed out in the public on his walk to work. And it was very moving to him. He said, wow, wouldn't it be a great idea if we could literally take all this wonderful art that we have in our museums and bring it out into the public? They did this in the UK largely with the assistance of the Tate. And they ran it over the summer of 2013. And again, it was a great public success. And then we got a call a year later, move this, from the Outdoor Advertising Association, which is basically the trade association that manages all the out-of-home media and inventory in the United States. And they had reached out to Max Anderson down at the Dallas Museum of Art and had asked him if he thought that the United States would be interested in doing a like program. The nice thing about this is that, or one of the nice things about this is that there was no cost to any of the museums. This was going to be something that was totally donated by the out-of-home media organization, and they were going to raise private funds to pay for all the panels and all the displays that were going to be done. It was just a question of would the museums be interested in partaking in this type of a program. There were 5 museums that were ultimately chosen. It started out with Max actually making some selections, but what he tried to do was to get museums that were both geographically representative as well as representing different parts of the American collection. And so the 5 museums that participated were LACMA, the Whitney National Gallery of Art, the Dallas Museum of Art, and the Art Institute of Chicago. Obviously, there are other great collections of American art as well, but it had to be limited somewhat in terms of how the program could be managed. But these were the 5 that joined in. And in terms of why we wanted to do this, I think it was one of those moments where as soon as the idea was explained, everybody immediately got excited about the opportunity to take many of our great works and share them with a much, much broader public that typically wouldn't or may not necessarily get to museums and typically wouldn't see all of these different pieces of art. And especially if we could do it in a way that was non-branded and could really get a broad reach and get the art in places where it would normally not be seen. Everybody saw that as a great opportunity. This particular shot is sort of a fun one. This is the huge mega screen in the Dallas Cowboys football stadium that was up during one of their games, because again, that's considered one of the billboards, if you will. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is just a little bit about how we got this done. What you see here is actually the staircase at Port Authority here in the city with Grant Wood's American Gothic. So first of all, it really did take a village to get this thing going. The Out-of-Home Association was very central to organizing this, and they really made it easy on the museums. But basically, we got a team at each of these 5 museums who quickly jumped on board and was able to then get a cross-disciplinary team at each museum involved with attorneys, with curators, with production people, marketing teams, PR teams. And everybody really jumped in on this. And literally with a weekly call for a number of months, we were able to get this entire thing afoot from February, when we first got the letter asking about this, to August, when it was all executed. Another thing that was particularly interesting was rights, because there was a lot of questions like, how are we possibly going to get rights for these works? These were American works that went from pre-colonial times all the way up through contemporary. So how do we do that? One of the things that we were able to work on was this whole notion of there's safety in numbers. And so each of the museum directors signed a common letter, and that was presented to key artists, but also to VAGA and ARS, saying that the 5 museums are really coming together. We thought this was an important endeavor, and we were looking for their support. And then beyond that, there were a number of other steps where different museums or curators would say, okay, I'll contact the Liechtenstein Estate, or I'll contact Jesper Johns, or people would use their own connections to help us get through and get some of the key approvals that we needed to work through. In the end, we received OKs on over 100 works and only had 2 denials. So everybody really got caught up in the spirit of this. And even the rights organizations, I don't think they'd say this officially, but in conversations, I think they were excited that this was happening and excited about the chance to get this out more broadly. Curatorial collaboration was key, and there was a question, at least from the Out of Home Association, to say, hey, will the curators go along with this? How will that work? And the curators were essential and fantastic in this process. And in each museum, it really took a cross-section of curators to be able to pull us together. So for example, at the Art Institute, we had the curators from contemporary, from photography, from architecture and design, from contemporary works on paper, and also from the American collection, obviously. And so 5 different groups, all of whom had to get on board. But I think there too, they were really taken by the idea of being able to get the work from the museums out to a broader public. And I think it was also a lot of fun for a lot of these curators playing off of their naturally curious and competitive natures to try to get their works out there. And we'll talk about this in a moment, but it was all going to be going up for a public vote. And so there was a lot of fun to say, okay, well, which artworks are more popular, at least as the public might see them. So the way this worked is each museum put out 20 works. So you worked internally to get 20 different works that were submitted, so 100 total. And then it basically, the whole group went out for a public vote on social media. And there was a website that was created, and for a month, Americans from all walks of life were able to vote on which work they thought, what they thought were their most favorite works. In that process, we were able to narrow the field of 100 down to 50. Each museum was able to still have 10 works that they were putting forward. And we also, after we got to the core 50 that people voted on, we were able to throw in a few extras that the directors at the 5 museums simply thought were important as part of this representation, or in some cases, we wanted to have a little bit more balance in terms of our multicultural artist contributions, and a few other ones added in as well. Oh, sorry, wrong way. The other piece I think that was particularly impressive about this group coming together is that everybody was able to check their egos at the door during this process, which again, given all the parties that were involved, wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. But everybody saw this as truly an opportunity to do something bigger than what each of us were doing individually. We maintained throughout this process an understanding of equality across the museum, so it wasn't going to be a purely popular vote where one museum may get more of their works than another. So every museum still had 10 works that they put forward as part of the celebration. And then when we did the kickoff in August, I think it was August 4th of last year, all 5 museum directors went to Times Square, and the association arranged for, I'd say probably 40% of all the billboards in Times Square were lit up with the Art Everywhere boards for the day. So it was really a momentous kickoff with lots of press coverage, and from that point on, for the entire month of August, these pieces appeared across the country. This is just a picture of some of the directors last year in Times Square. You can see above them a few of the pieces. In terms of what we got from an outcome on this, we had over $100 million in media value. This was literally picked up by TV, the TV press, by, here, this is some of the things you can see, some of the titles, but the print press, television, radio was really carried quite widely across the country in terms of just people getting the word out, telling people how and where to find these pieces, and that was a terrific kickoff for the event. Social media was also a big component, although as I'll mention in a minute, this part of it didn't go quite as far as we had ultimately hoped it would go, but nonetheless, there was a huge social component. One of the things that was particularly fun for social media is we worked with an app called Blipper, and with Blipper you could basically take your phone, hold it up against any of these works that were at ground level, so not a highway board, but anything on a bus panel or a passing thing, and the app would immediately recognize the work and then take you to a page that told you more about the artist, about where it could be seen, at what museum, and it gave you some of the history that each of the curators provided along with the work. So that was a way of really just taking it, not from just people seeing passing visuals, but giving people a chance to really learn more and giving them an invitation to come into the museums. Social media, we, as I said, had all kinds of postings, not only by individuals, but then by the museums, of people experiencing the art in any number of ways. Some people created scavenger hunts where they go and see how many they could find, but really all kinds of fun and engaging ways that people got involved. And, but people, the biggest question that we got from this was how successful was Art Everywhere? So these pieces appeared on 60,000 postings across the country, which was remarkable unto itself, and it all came together in 6 months. But in terms of what kind of an impact did it have, clearly we saw the type of media coverage that we got, and we got a fair amount of social. That would be one area that we definitely wanted to, or would want to, improve ahead, is putting more attention on the social media portion of the campaign. But I think, the biggest thing that we don't have an answer for is, how many more people did this bring into the museums? Of course, that would be the question everybody would love to have. We measure our attendance pretty carefully at the Art Institute, and even then we weren't able to get exact numbers. But in many instances, I think what was particularly moving was just even the individual observations. When we saw people in the city standing at a bus panel and just really staring at one of these works, or the anecdotal feedback that we got in terms of how people were so excited that they saw something in a new context or in a new place. And I think that's what was most enriching. And the final thing I'll mention here on this piece is that some of you may have seen an article in the New York Times last week about a like program that was happening of all places in Tehran. Did anybody see that in the New York Times last week? So a similar program, not necessarily under the same name, was done there, albeit for a different set of motivations. But they basically took over all of the billboards in Tehran and last week and put art on all of them. So there was no commercial advertising whatsoever in the city. And they took art from around the world. I don't know if they went through any process or got any permissions or did anything else, but it's up in Iran. But again, I think that also is, testimony to how a program like this will continue to evolve, and they're talking in the future about doing one with emerging artists. That would be the next one that they might do in 2016 to feature emerging artists and some of their work, again, around the country. So, thank you.
All right, my name is Aaron Ott. I'm the curator of public art at the Albright Knox. I am honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's exciting and humbling to see a lot of these projects that are relatively new. The Albright Knox is the 6th oldest museum in America. It's entering its 153rd year as an institution, and we are entering our 2nd year with a public art program. So it's very new to us and new to the region in Buffalo. I wanted to start by kind of contextualizing some of the work that is public, that is on the campus at the Albright Knox. So this, of course, is a Tony Smith piece, well-recognized work, well-beloved work. One of the things that the Albright is well known for is acquiring work shortly after it was produced. It's sort of a point of pride at the AK. So this work, 1967, acquired in 68. This is Jim Hodges' work, fabricated in 2005, acquired in 2006. And the next couple pieces this one included were all works that were placed on the grounds when Louis was there. So, that was a real new element to how the grounds could be utilized for the public that I think is going to be a legacy that Louis has left. Here we see the Nancy Rubens work that's on campus. a beloved work. It's interesting that you were talking about the Rubens at UT, because I just spoke to Mary Beebe maybe 2 weeks ago, and she had said one of the pieces that she really wanted to do that they never were able to produce was a Nancy Rubens, because they couldn't figure out how they could put it on campus without a whole bunch of people climbing on it and sleeping in it and falling off of it. And Mary asked me if we had that problem. We don't. I mean, you can see the placement of this work is right outside the main 1905 building. And it's under video surveillance, and it has bright lights on it. And we are right across the street from a university, Buff State. But we haven't had any problems, although I have to admit, I love the way that you installed it on the plinth. And that's a question I'm going to ask you, because I feel like it probably took you a while to figure that answer out, but it's so obvious and elegant at the same time that I love it, and I want to tell Mary to just go elevate the damn thing. Because, it's actually, so we're in a room full of curators, right? And sometimes we get so focused on the work and how we think it should be presented that we miss some of the obvious solutions to present it. And so I was really, really excited to see that. That work, the Rubens, was commissioned 2012 and installed in 2012. And this is Jason Middlebrooks. Underlife, commissioned 2012, 2013, installed 2013. So again, trying to rethink what our physical campus could look like. When Yanne Serin joined the Albright Knox as the new director, he wanted to think of how he could push out into the public. Yanne came to us from Helsinki, where he was the director of the Helsinki Art Museum, and part of that institution as a government institution is to place works into the public throughout Helsinki. And so Yanne thought, well, we should do that in Buffalo. But rather than just do it in Buffalo, he started talking with our county executive, Mark Pollinkars, who very generously seeded the money to support my position and operations at the Albright, and we've since been joined by the city of Buffalo. That's significant in that the Albright Knox has not received dedicated direct funding from the city of Buffalo in over 20 years. And this is the first time that we've gotten that funding in support of this program. I will say it's interesting listening to these notions of space and place with reference to specific campuses, right? So the AK is a specific campus. UT is a specific campus, and I think you said 463 acres, give or take, Storm King at 500 acres. Erie County is 1,058 square miles. So it's a massive curatorial space that we have to think about, which is both exciting and daunting. So the question was, when we embark on work that's not on campus, what's the best way to introduce to the public what we're doing? And we wanted to do that with a program that was dynamic and that involved works that weren't just sculptures. So the very first piece that we did was this installation performance piece, essentially by a group called Tape Art, Providence, Rhode Island, group that comes in and works with painter's tape on public spaces. And one of the great aspects of their work is that really anybody can get involved. So this was a student group. This work was installed at the Erie County Public Library. This was a student group that was there for a school trip anyway, and then they were able to come outside and help produce the mural with us. And this is the finished work. This is up about 45 feet on a facade, and then the piece ran about 200 feet long and was up for about 8 days. And one of the things that we anticipated, and one of the great aspects of this kind of work, is that when it comes down, people are like, why are you taking it down? We want it to be up forever. And we get to say, well, it's painter's tape, and it would look terrible if it were up forever. But it gives us the opportunity to more broadly speak about how it is that we can place work in the public realm. It starts a conversation wherein we can be a little bit more responsive rather than dictating to a community about what they should have. The first permanent piece that we put up is by Casey Reardon Millard. This is called Shark Girl. This became such a sensation in Buffalo that it's a little hard to believe, but she has become like an icon of the city, and trust me, if I had told you that I was going to create an icon out of a half shark, half girl sculpture, I'd be lying, but it has become a really wonderful, beloved piece. This was put up in August. We got a flood of photographs of people dressing up as Shark Girl for Halloween, We had people who sent out their Christmas cards with Shark Girl, and we have had at least 3 wedding announcements in front of Shark Girl. So it's a little crazy. She likes buffalo. This is her in one of Buffalo's beautiful weather. So we tried to move her to a slightly more covered location. This was 3 days after we tried to move her. She was frozen to the ground, so we had to leave her there till this spring. She's a little bit more acceptable. But to show you how beloved she's become, this is a varsity basketball team. Their mascot is the shark, so that's their shark kissing our shark. And so we wanted to produce work that did exactly what this room is doing, which is laugh, which is to take it seriously but not seriously at the same time. It's work that can be touched. It's work that can be put on social media. In fact, there is a Twitter handle called Shark Girl Buffalo that we do not run and is really a great time. I highly recommend it. And so it sort of took on a life of its own. And that cuts to the heart of what we want to be doing. We want to be producing work that the public can sort of self-author and have a sort of sense of self-ownership over. So the next project we did was a billboard project. This is Matthew Hoffman's work called You Are Beautiful. This was the densest installation to date of Matthew's work. We did 44 billboards over the course of 4 months throughout Western New York and up into Niagara County as well. When I was doing this work with Matthew, I was really adamant that there be no advertising, that it not say that it was the AK that was producing this work, that it simply presented itself in the landscape, and that people had to define meaning from that. And Lamar, who partnered with us to make it, was totally fine with that because all their billboards already say Lamar. But they were very, very generous. In fact, we did not, all of the space was donated by Lamar. All of the production was donated by Lamar. Our cost was simply to the artist for usage fees. But one of the great things that happened from this project was we would hear anecdotal stories from especially parents who'd be driving along with their kids, and their child would say, "Mommy, Daddy, why does that sign say you are beautiful?" And we'd get these amazing, sometimes heart-wrenching emails sent to us going like, "Oh gosh, this is what I said to my kid. Did I get it right?" And the answer is, of course you got it right, because it sort of doesn't matter what you say to your child about a sign that says you are beautiful. That's the sort of the heart and the essence of the work itself, is that dialogue that happens well outside of our control. So I really like producing work like that. Another aspect of the work is the sticker aspect of it. People, it's hard to see here, but this is somebody holding up a sticker in front of fireworks, and people will take these stickers with them and place them in their landscape. We have distributed almost 100,000 stickers over the course of 6 months. Over 2 million stickers have been distributed since the beginning of the work, the inception of the work in 2002, I want to say. And there are stickers on every continent, including Antarctica, which is kind of amazing. So I wanted to bring you back to our campus. This is Jaume Plenza's work. Laura, this is on AK's North Portico, and we were able to facilitate a loan of works of Jaume's by a private lender to a location called Canalside, which is a burgeoning cultural destination in the city. To give you a sense of how the landscape culturally is changing in Buffalo, the site of Canalside right now is a bit of a miracle. It was scheduled to be the site of the world's largest Bass Pro shop. The community wonderfully, negatively reacted to that and said, "We are better than this. We're better than a big Bass Pro shop." And so now Canalside hosts over 1 million people a year with concerts, with boat launches, and now we're proud to say with public art. So these are installed in Miami, but these are the works that we were able to procure. Moving forward, one of our questions is, how do we get out to 1,000 square miles? And so we're trying to find artists that are working with performative gestures that can be reproduced from site to site, and that can sort of operate as destinations simultaneously. So this is work by Jenny Kendler. She is the artist in residence at the Natural Resources Defense Council. This work is called Milkweed Dispersal Balloons. These are biodegradable balloons filled with milkweed pods. Milkweed is the sole source of food for monarch butterfly larvae. Monarch butterflies are a migratory species, the largest insect migration in the world. and the eastern edge of that migration passes through western New York. So what she does is she goes out and produces, basically gives you a balloon full of milkweed, and you go pop it in your backyard and grow some milkweed or release them into the environment since they're biodegradable. So we're excited to produce this work all throughout a variety of locations. And in addition, we're sort of expanding a work. This is a work called A Place of Light and Wind. This was installed at the Violet Hour, a bar actually in Chicago that often uses its facade for public art. Now, what Jenny did with this piece is, you can see here, she embedded a QR code into the mural. And what you could do is you could go scan the QR code, and you could sign up to get native prairie seeds sent to your home, and you could plant prairie seeds. When I was talking to Jenny, I said, well, I love this concept, but I hate the execution because it relies on technology that is not in everybody's hands, especially the people that we might want to reach. And so what we are doing here, and it's a little hard to see, but what we've done is we've gotten 10 boxes. They're called honor boxes. It's what you get your newspaper out of, donated by the Buffalo News. And we're going to be distributing 10,000 packets of native wildflower seeds to a variety of locations throughout western New York. So we're going to be doing a saturation of them on the east side of Buffalo, which is a space that is sort of has a burgeoning immigrant population as well as a refugee population. Largely African-American based. Buffalo is a very segregated city, like many major cities in America, and we're sort of trying to reach a new audience with this work, so we're excited to place that there soon. Another aspect of the work that we want to do is get out to gateway sites, so we're going to be doing an installation of Karina Kaikkonen's work. She's a Finnish artist, and this will be installed at the Buffalo Niagara International Airport above the ticketing counters on either side. So this will be a 300-foot by 25-foot installation. What Karina does is sort of collectively, we'll have a donation center for shirts that then get tied together by volunteers, and that'll form the core of the work. And then coming up next week, we're going to be installing Shane Dark's work at the Buffalo and Erie County Botanical Gardens. This is a large outdoor work. There'll be a variation of this work that'll be 20 feet tall, that'll be outside here of House 12. And we're going to be utilizing the indoor space as well. This is a work called Windfall that'll be in the main house. This will be the first work that you see in house number 1. And you can kind of see we're going to do about 22 pieces, half in, half out. One of the aspects, the Botanical Gardens is a pay site, and as a mission of the Public Art Initiative, I wanted to have it be free, and so we have about half the works that'll be installed outside the gardens as well as inside. So I often include this slide when talking about public art because a lot of people will come to me and they say, I have this terrible space. Can you fix it with public art? And the answer is probably not, if that's all you want me to do. So these are actually, this is in our collection, but installed in a laundromat. This is also our Judd. And down here you can't see it, but this is great. This Sarah installed inside. And we can't just go fix problems in the city with public art. They need to be integrated. They need to be thoughtfully placed. They can't just be put down. They can placemake. They can change spaces, but they can't just be placed there. I often go back to a work like this to talk about that aspect, but to also talk about aspects of how, one of the questions we get asked all the time is, how'd you fund this? Well, this was, of course, Picasso's work in Daley Plaza. This work was cost $300,000 in 1966. So if you put that into today's dollars, you're looking at roughly $1.5 to $1.8 million, depending. And if somebody walked in and said, you could have the world's largest Picasso for $1.8 million, you would take that. You would do that. And so I think that oftentimes we see and hear numbers that are quite large. $1.5 million is a big number, but the impact that it can make on a civic space is pretty immeasurable. So we're looking at how it is in our landscape. We can try and figure out what that means. So in Buffalo, if you're not familiar with the landscape there, one of the defining features are our grain silos. Now, these are not grain silos in Buffalo. These are in Vancouver. And these are the ones that, this is what they look like after Os Gêmeos, a Brazilian duo, painted it. Now, Os Gêmeos can be rather challenging, and I would maybe make the argument that Os Gêmeos would not be the right choice for Buffalo right now, because it's quite a dramatic statement. But to figure out what can be done in a space like this is very exciting. So, for example, in Boston, this is a building that is a ventilation system for the Big Dig. There's this giant building above Greenway Park, and they wondered what we do with it, so they invited Os Gêmeos to paint it. Now, this was a bit controversial because people didn't understand what was going on. Why is this person turbaned? Are they a terrorist? It was actually not well received, but because it was not permanent, the dialogue around it I thought was quite successful, because right after that, Matthew Ritchie painted it, and then Shanique Smith painted it. And so trying to find spaces and places where people can count on art in their landscape that shifts, that they can talk about, that they have the freedom to dissent, to dislike, is actually really important, because it helps us keep our conversation going. So we're looking to have spaces like this being produced in Buffalo. So that's what I've got.
Okay, well, thank you all for those wonderful presentations. It was really great to see what's been going on across the country, I guess you could say, in all your different organizations. Does anyone have any questions? I thought I would just open it up because I feel like this is a really relevant topic, but if there aren't ones, oh, we have one. Okay, good. Do we have a microphone for them at all? I think that might be better. Okay, so raise your hand if you have a question. And we'll... Hello.
Oh, I think our mics are off now, too.
So the questions are, you guys are going to have to answer them one at a time. I can't hold the mics on at the same time.
Okay.
So we flip them on and off?
No, I'll turn it on.
Oh, okay.
But just so you know.
Is it on?
No.
Okay. I'm Karen Lemmy, sculpture curator at Smithsonian American Art Museum. A really interesting panel. Thank you all. My question is very fundamental. I was wondering if any of you could speak about maintenance on these wonderful large outdoor projects, and how do you build that into the planning phase, and how successful has it been? Thank you.
Hi, Karen, and we've talked about this before, but we build it in from the beginning if there are works that are, I mean, not only if there are works that are permanent, but it's always part of our budgeting process. So we have a Tony Smith work source on long-term loan right now, and that was part of the initial idea of how much this piece was going to cost us. Year on year was a plan to conserve it. And we don't have a full-time conservator on staff, but we work with artist estates and their preferred conservators. We work with conservators who advise us, and we have a team on staff who's trained to do basic conservation work, cleaning, waxing, things like that. So we sort of handle it in different ways, but it is always part of our budgeting. So I'm done. Oh, yeah.
Situation's kind of interesting because we're not operating at the Albright Knox, and we're often we're sometimes on city property, we're sometimes on county property, we're sometimes on private property. What we tend to do is build it into the acquisition costs, but also try and address that with whoever our partner is in terms of the site. And so because a lot of contemporary art can be quite expensive, a lot of times the deals that we strike at the Albright are that we can help take the bulk of the acquisition cost to acquire the work, get it there, get it installed, but that the site then has to agree to long-term maintain that. So it's sort of a deferred cost for us. It's built into the budget, but it's it's a known entity from the beginning, because I think if you go into these things not recognizing how you can maintain it, then they're gonna be beat up.
Because Aaron spoke most recently. The Cindy Sherman in the laundromat.
It's a great
so
book.
It's a great combo. I love it. But what about conservation issues and security? And I mean, it's like many of the pieces, very expensive work. So especially with works on paper, how do you deal with that?
Well, so there's a couple different ways that we try and deal with that. With certain works, we take a deep breath and hope that the public treats us nicely. We've had really good. I mean, I will say that there hasn't been a lot of public art in Buffalo for quite some time. There's a number of reasons for that I won't get into, but I think that the public has really responded super positively to the work we're doing, and consequently they're frankly helping us take care of the work and giving us a better understanding of how we can integrate it into their landscapes so that it's honored by everybody. That said, we also, we have to answer questions like, well, what if somebody climbs the sculpture and jumps off of it? It's like, well, what if somebody climbs a park bench and jumps off of it? It's the same kind of liability that we have to assume, and we do, but we don't busy ourselves worrying about it. We protect ourselves, but we kind of have a lot of faith in the public, and so far they have honored us back. With respect to works on paper or photographs, works that are sensitive, that aren't going to react well to an environment that's not a museological one. I mean, in fact, we don't keep photographs up in a museum for very long, right? So we will work with artists to reproduce works. So, for example, there's an artist that we're working with right now, David Parker, whose photographs are generated digitally, and what we are acquiring are the digital files, and we acquire with that the right to reproduce, so that we can place them in a space where we know they'll get burned, right? The sun is going to take a toll, but it allows us to represent that work anew when we can. So wherever we can find an edition agreement or reproducing rights with artists, that's the direction we go.
The question was, is the UT program funded with percentage for art following the UCSD model?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. In 2005, the university adopted a policy that would set aside 1% to 2% of new construction projects or major renovation projects. And so it's from those funds that we're able to acquire the works. However, those funds are only capitalizable, or have been up until now, meaning that, to add on to the first question about funding for conservation, those are funds that I have raised for the program, aside from the acquisitions.
I'm Amanda Burden at the Brandywine River Museum of Art, and we are about to install our very first site-specific outdoor sculpture later this summer. And we're in the midst of debating how many different kinds of ways and what styles we should do the didactics and labels and how to deliver that information when it's on our campus and off of our campus. And we've thought about the QR codes, but similarly didn't want to exclude anyone that didn't have that technology. So if you have any advice or things that have worked, I'd appreciate it.
Hello? Okay. We thought a lot about that too. And where we ended up landing, well, first of all, we talked a long time and developed guidelines for our signage because on the one hand, you want it to be visible. On the other hand, you don't want it to compete with the work visually. So that's a tough balance to strike. I think we've done a pretty good job. On our panels themselves, we simply have the most basic information about the work of art and direct people to our website. And what we found, because we have, what do you call it, mobile ability website. It's, yeah,
Not an app.
no, well, we had an app also, but it's, I've lost the term, but that it's equally visible on multiple platforms. It's responsive, thank you. So it's a responsive website, and from there, people can read original scholarship about the work. They can look up bibliographic highlights. They can look at children's activity guides or stream audio about the piece or even watch a video. And because our works are spread out over such a large area, I think that it's really helpful to people to be able to access that information on their mobile devices. Most people have them. Most people may not have the barcodes, as you were mentioning. That was something that's kind of a barrier for some people. But if you can access a website on your phone, then we've found that that's a really good platform for being able to disseminate that information.
Just something to add on that. Just working? Yeah, just one point to add on that. We're doing a public sculpture celebration in Chicago this summer, and we're using a different technology, which basically you have a small sign nearby and you text a number, and then you immediately receive a phone call, and on the phone call you get whatever background information or history is is provided. You can obviously record whatever you want to, but that's also another way of providing the information, so it's not obtrusive in the physical space, but people can listen to whatever dialogue or context you want to provide.
Hello? Oh, that one is working. I probably didn't turn it on. I'm not sure who this is for, so I'm throwing it out there. We all know of great, really well-intended examples of public art in which there is absolutely no sensitivity to place, space, quality of the art, plop art, you know what I'm talking about. So how, if there's a kind of pre-existing, I think you mentioned there was not really much in Buffalo, you handled that issue very cleverly, I think. But when you're dealing with donors, supporters, the constituencies that you really want to win over to support these projects, help us understand how you negotiate all of that.
The question. So you're asking when you're trying to win over people when you're in the process of acquiring a work, or when they're proposing something you don't want to do? Ah, okay. Well, in the university setting, what I have been able to set in motion and has worked really successfully is to separate the vetting of proposed works, volunteer works that really wouldn't qualify for the landmarks collection by having a separate committee and not having that fall on us to be the bad guys. And I found that that has worked really well, because then if they don't find that it's of sufficient quality to be on the campus, then they're a separate group of art experts who can communicate that back. In terms of support for works that we want to acquire, that's a really good question, and for all of the projects that we've undertaken, it's been virtually a different strategy every time, depending on who the players were involved. But typically, I think, as with anything, the leadership comes from the top, And if the president of the university or the VPs are saying this is important and this is good for our university and this is something we can be proud about and we need to get behind it, then a reluctant dean might fall in line.
You know, we're looking to produce a couple different kinds of work, right? So we're looking to deal with social practice artists because it's a little bit more responsive, right? You can go into communities. A part of the work is dialogic, so you have this sort of sounding board for what you're going to produce. And again, for us, it's really important to produce spaces that are sort of safe for the community to come to and air their desires, but also air their grievances, so that we can sort of tailor the work for a specific site. Often that's for much smaller interventions, right? That might be for a mural, it might be for a small sculpture, it might be for an interaction between a community and not something that is maybe more landmark-based, right? Not monumental. For the monumental work, for the bigger work, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a sort of that, you know, when Yanne and Joe and Kathleen Chaffee and Holly Hughes and myself and all the curatorial staff gets together and we believe in a work, I think that we talk a lot about how to best present that work and try and find those spaces in the region which are most receptive to that dialogue, and that, you know, that takes a while. You know, the Plenzas, you know, we had probably 4 or 5 locations that all would have been great, but ultimately landed at Canalside because we just felt like it was the right space at the right time. There's a pedestrian ferry that is going to open up between the Inner Harbor and Outer Harbor first time this year. It'll be the first time ever you can access the Outer Harbor from downtown Buffalo. And so we really wanted to draw attention to that, and these works act as a beacon to that location, right? But we had certain people that were just like, well, you just put Shark Girl down there, and now you're planning on doing another work down there, and like, why are you going back to the same place over and over again? And, you know, we have to be ready for those criticisms, but yeah, when it's work like Plenza, or when it's work like Nancy Rubens, or, you know, I mean, you got to get behind it because it's great work.
How about now? Oh yeah, sorry. For the Landmarks program and any other university-affiliated programs, I'm wondering if you could explain your structure and relationship to the university. I think you mentioned a dean, and I'm curious if you're an auxiliary unit or if you function under the College of Fine Arts. And then more casually, if you could explain your relationship to the other cultural organizations on campus, like the Blanton, or et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
So Landmarks operates as its own cultural entity within the university. So it's not under the umbrella of the Blanton Museum, but we do coordinate together and collaborate on projects as well as with the Visual Arts Center, which is another cultural organization, a visual arts organization on campus. The structure is that I report to the Dean of the Fine Arts, and we're one of 2 non-academic units within the college. So in terms of the ways that we vet the works and approve the works, I have a small committee, which is my advisory committee. They're made up of different people throughout the university, and in fact, they include a Blanton curator, as well as art historians and student representation, architectural landscapes, landscapers, and a group of just really deeply informed and sensitive people who both understand the material and understand the cultural landscape and the political landscape of the university. And so often it's in those conversations that we brainstorm ideas. I tell them their biggest job is to keep me from doing anything stupid, and they're happily willing to do that. And then we go through a Byzantine process of review and approval and review and approval until it gets to the level of the president and the Board of Regents on occasion. But by the time it reaches that stage, we have done so much groundwork in terms of winning support, getting people behind the project, having it reviewed, having it picked apart, reviewing it again, kicking it up. And as Aaron was saying, each one of these projects are completely different. And the last piece that I showed, that big shell, for example, the new dean of the medical school was really curious. Why do we want an enormous shell in front of our medical school? What does this mean? And what I found is that if you can figure out ways to explain the work metaphorically that they can relate to, even if it's not the core of what the work's about, but if it's something that they can hold on to, then it makes it really easy for them to see it. So for instance, with that piece, I asked him, well, what's a shell? It's this complex structure that protects delicate organisms. And isn't that what medicine is about and the medical industry? And so he got that, and it made it much easier to move forward. But it's a series of those kinds of conversations over a long period of time that I think really make them successful by the time they get to the final stage.
Hi, Anna Marley from Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and I have a question for Gordon and Aaron. And something, Gordon, that you touched on when you spoke was, how do you measure success? And did the billboards actually make people come to museums? And so my question is specific and general. We've done a few performance pieces outside PAFA. We've partnered with Amtrak to do performances at 30th Street Station. And we also have a Tiffany Maxfield Parish mosaic that we own, but it's in a building not near PAFA. And I'm not sure that even when we have these wonderful things, I don't think anybody knows that they're associated with the museum. And so Aaron touched on this as well, you have these sculptures, like Shark Girl is very popular, but does that drive people back to the museum? Do they associate that with the museum? Does it matter? In our case, we would love people to come to the museum, but we're not sure how to make that happen. And I'm wondering if you have any creative and fun, happy advice for how to excite that rather than like dogmatic labels or, forcing people.
Is this one on? It's a great question. I'm not sure I can adequately answer it. Or at least get to the challenge. But I think when we did Art Everywhere, one of our goals was to get the art out there in a way that would at least, get into the social conversation. And our hope was, of course, that by virtue of getting this type of exposure to a lot of these great works, both, far more historical as well as contemporary, that people would be taken by this. The information that we had on the pieces included the artist's name, the title, the date, and the museum where the work was present. So that was part of our hope that, in fact, it would get people to think about doing that. Again, we weren't able to measure how many people did. I think this is one of those long-term propositions that maybe didn't get them to come this week or that month, but if it piqued their curiosity or instilled an emotional connection, that in and of itself was a win. And I think we also looked at it as, by virtue of getting all these, these different works out into the public, that was also part of our mission. Even if we couldn't get people back into the museums, if we could get people somehow moved by these pieces wherever they were, that would in and of itself be, a fulfillment of our mission and what we were, all trying to do. I think, I recently read about Crystal Bridges in Arkansas and a new program that they're working on where they're very much recognizing that there are people around the state of Arkansas who will never be able to get to the museum. And they're increasingly now developing online programs to help educate and present their work with a full recognition that many of these people won't get in, but at least they're getting the work out. And I see that as a sort of similar parallel.
We had an exhibition in 2012 at Governor's Island, so in New York Harbor off of Manhattan, and we took it to be, it was an exhibition of Mark DeSuvro's work, and we worked pretty hard with our press team to come up with the proper title, which was, I think it was Mark DeSuvro at Governor's Island presented by Storm King Art Center, and obviously that's a mouthful, but if, you know, it's going to come up in the press, even if it's not going to be what an everyday user is talking about. But we felt it was just such a good opportunity for us to let people know more about Storm King, and for us, it seemed like the Governor's Island landscape was something that had, and seeing Mark DeSuvro's work there was something that we could sort of tie into our principles and our sort of mission at Storm King pretty closely. And we did find that, I think there have been a number of other things going on, but our attendance has been on the rise since then, and it seemed kind of like it would have been a missed opportunity with the number of people that go to Governor's Island that were seeing that. So it was sort of a bit of a gamble, and you don't get to know, but it was something that we feel definitely was helpful for us in terms of raising our profile with people in New York City, and being able also to advertise to people going to Governor's Island that they could use public transportation also to get to Storm King relatively quickly. So.
Hi, I'm Al Miner from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston.
Great.
I'm interested to know what role, if any, the commercial galleries that represent the artists you work with play in the financial part. Are the galleries ever fronting, say, fabrication costs for you to make this more possible financially? If you do acquire the work, does the fabrication cost then come out of the acquisition price? Or, you know, what has that relationship been like?
So it, you know, project to project, it's totally different. I think that's probably the answer that you're going to hear from everybody up here. But, you know, for example, with Shane Dark's work, you know, the cost of, so the way the EAK's public art initiative is set up is a little unusual in that a lot of our funding comes from acquisition funds. So we have to be careful about how those get allocated. So in order for us to do the work at the botanical gardens that we're doing, part of the agreement was that Shane would come do a residency program and produce a work that would then be acquired by the AK Public Art Initiative, and that all of the costs associated with the exhibition are essentially deferred to the cost of the acquisition. So it's a little bit of a linguistic turn, right? But it serves us to produce work that we might not otherwise be able to do. And then, yeah, we find partnerships. So like I said, with Lamar, I mean, that was, you know, I couldn't begin to guess, probably a $200,000 project that, I mean, we don't have that in the bank. So they helped produce, you know, they gave us the sites and they gave us the production in kind. And so, yeah, wherever we can make those deals or get work done, we certainly try to. I would say that it's a privilege being at the Albright because it certainly opens doors. I mean, when you have a museum entity or an institutional entity that you can leverage because people are excited to be associated with it, and take that and run, because, you know, I mean, that's what, the Plenzas were facilitated almost entirely through the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, the entity that runs Canalside, because on our own we would not have been able to facilitate it. It just wasn't in my budget at all. But you go out to the community and you say, this is good for what we're doing, and sometimes that comes through relationships with gallerists. Oftentimes it comes through direct relationships with the artists, because a lot of our public work is commission-based. We find ourselves working directly with artists as much as we do with gallerists. So.
I could answer that as well. We find that, I mean, when we're borrowing works, oftentimes artists will want to show something major that they are either making recently or have made recently or are just finishing up. And so it can be difficult. I don't know what other people have found, but for borrowing works on a large scale, it can be much simpler to work directly with the artist and their gallery than uprooting something that is permanently installed at another major sculpture park, sculpture garden collection, private collection. So we do end up working with the artists and their galleries to sort of source things or think about options. And if things are commissioned for us, we pay for them, and then if it's a direct commission, we'll pay for it. And then yes, we have had that experience where the fabrication cost, if we ultimately buy the work, will be reduced. Will reduce the purchase price. I'm not sure. I couldn't say always, but definitely that has happened. And then in other cases, it will happen that we don't see ourselves as being the right person to fabricate a loan of a work that's being produced in any case. So we sort of leave that to the artist to work it out, and we borrow it for our exhibition, and the artist then has possession of it again.
So I can answer for the Highline because I went on the Highline tour this Sunday, and Melanie Kress, who is the curatorial fellow there, said that they commission all of the work that's going up on the Highline. Mostly, sometimes it is loans, but when they commission, it's a 3-year contract. So if the work does get sold after it's been on display for 1 year, because they're only up for 1 year on the Highline, within that 3 years, they do get refunded the fabrication costs. So if that makes any sense there. Do we have any more questions?
Okay, all right. Hi, Catherine Kraft from the Nasher Sculpture Center in Dallas. I had a question. I think Nora and Aaron mentioned residencies for artists working there, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you see artist residencies working with this larger programs that you've been talking about, because it's something we're exploring and beginning to do as well. Thanks.
Well, I mean, again, it sort of dovetails on an earlier question. I mean, the nice part about doing residencies is that you get a little bit more integrated into communities. You have the opportunities for feedback. You have, and I love residencies because they often result in work being created in a way that the public gets to view from sort of start to finish. And I feel like a lot of what we do seems as if it's, behind the curtains or maybe even smoke and mirrors. But I like the ability to show work as it's being created, especially in a community. So, with Shane, again, it was an opportunity to really produce a work that had local resonance. So his work deals with reclaimed wood and it's actually can be very difficult to transport that across borders. All of the work that we're receiving is painted or treated in a way that allows it to cross borders fairly easily. But what we're doing locally is we're going to be scavenging wood from the Olmsted properties in Buffalo and from county parks, so that work can be created on site and be sort of a permanent thing that doesn't need to travel, so it doesn't need to be treated in the same way. So it sort of alleviates some of those concerns about construction and maintenance right off the bat. But it also gives the public a great opportunity to come down and see like a chainsaw wielding maniac make, great work. And so that's a lot of fun. And so I think that trying to just let people know that cultural production is part of a daily work and part of what makes a civic space or a region kind of vibrant is really important. So if we can bring artists for long periods of time rather than just saying, here's this great object and don't you love it, the residencies really facilitate a more direct contact with the public. We're still trying to figure out what that means in terms of how we best facilitate the residencies. Shane's is a very short one. It'll be about 2 weeks. We're right now in conversation with several board members and potential donors who might facilitate longer commitments between the sort of 6 and 18-month range, so that we can really get some community commitment to the work that we produce. But having tangible, physical community feedback is the reason we wanted to get involved with the residency program.
It's interesting because we have been looking at, there's so many different types of artist residencies and so many different models, and we've had a number of artists just over the years, let's say, stay at Storm King for a month or 2 months or whatever it might be. Virginia Overton, spent weekend after weekend after weekend sort of walking the site and up in one of our houses. But with this formal residency that we're doing, we are really detaching the residency from the idea of the residency that we're doing with the Shandaken Project. We're detaching it from the idea of showing work at Storm King. And we're sort of saying more, this is a great, beautiful place that we're hoping will be inspirational to you. So we're going to have this residency at the south end of our property. So as I was saying, there's still sort of a large area that doesn't have really artworks on it, so it's kind of public-private. But what we're doing, we're thinking of it as something that really helps us because I said, it's hard for us to, we're a small organization, it's hard for us to work with that many artists or give back to that many artists as we may want to at a time. But we're hoping that this is a way to sort of engage with artists and have sort of a positive experience with them. And we're also commissioning with these artists who come to this residency program our Wanderings and Wonderings program, which is a public program / artistic interventions that either might have to do with our landscape, they might have to do with our collection, but we're working with the residents of the Shandaken Project to sort of feed this Wanderings and Wonderings program that we do. So,
I think one more? No more. Judah says no more. Our panelists will be here probably during lunch, so maybe you can ask them questions then. But thank you all very much for your questions, and thank you guys for participating.